The four ladies, we had a preparatory meeting and we were all kind of sitting down and chatting, and I asked them, what's your weird? Because everybody kind of has their own uniqueness, their own weird, and everyone puts it on the canvas, their weird representationally. Hers is an incredible knowledge of art history. Pretty much everything you see up there in the show up there is a reference or a nod to someone or some era in art history. Many of them I had to like dust off my art history minor just to remember the names that she was referencing that we walked through. Pluperfect tense, I think, is that what it's called? There's a woman facing away from the viewer, and there's some really gorgeous long shadows. And it was De Chirico. That was the artist De Chirico, and his really strong, and he was somebody who influenced the surrealists. She wanted to explore, am I putting words in your mouth?
No.
The shadows of his work. So that's where her weird is. Everybody has a weird.
Yeah. I probably took more art history classes than I did art classes.
Did you really? Yeah.
It just, to me, it addressed my work.
Mm-hmm.
It inspired my work. So I was really addicted to art history. It's my drug of choice.
That's cool. Yeah, I get that.
With her, I just wanted to lay her out almost finished. And then after all the embroidery is done, I'll go back in and refine the figure. But all the rest of this is going to be really flat, kind of Japanese style art. So,
Are you using acrylics, dyes?
this is oil,
Okay.
the oil paint, and then just plain old embroidery thread.
So you're using a gessoed canvas to start with,
Yes.
and just a
Yeah.
very sharp needle.
Right. Yeah, I have a lot of really long needles to get up in the near the frame and everything.
What do you mean by Japanese style?
Just a real flat. Cause like the figure is really painterly, and then the rest of it's going to be kind of flat. And so that's and it is a Japanese stitch. This is a shishiko right here. And then I'm gonna put more types of Japanese stitches down there.
Did you live in Japan?
No, I have a Japanese daughter-in-law.
Oh, okay.
But I just really love the calmness. So this is supposed to just make the viewer feel really calm.
Is that kind of thread or embroidery floss or yarn, or what do you use?
Mostly I just use the kind of embroidery threads you can buy at Michael's, but sometimes I use mohair, gold. I'll probably put some gold in this one. And so step out of my box every now and then, but mostly it's just cheap thread.
So when did you start adding embroidery to your pieces?
Well, I will say in my master's show, I did sew into that work a little bit, but I hadn't really revisited that for a long time. So I just started this about a year ago.
Were you doing more oils or were you doing more embroidery before you put them together?
Oil, just straight.
You were painting.
Yeah, just straight painting.
Yeah.
But then I felt like it needed another layer of painting. I was starting to get bored with it, and I just thought, I need to add a layer. So,
What did you explore in that piece? You mentioned earlier that you wove in mythology and other things, so what were you exploring there?
well, with this, I'm kind of referencing Japanese poetry, haiku, and so keeping it really calm and simple. And I really like Basho. He's a Japanese poet from the 1600s, and so I'm kind of thinking literarily. A lot of my work is literary. Not always. Like that piece up front, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the dress, and I knew I would probably stitch into it, but I wasn't sure what kind of stitch And then I just thought the bouillon made sense, kind of that wormy looking stitching, because it would kind of integrate her with the nature behind her. So, but mine, I'm like the rest, they evolve.
I think they're all intuitive artists, and they just sort of allow, we all have that little part of our brain in the back where the slow cooking, the thoughts happen when we're not actively thinking about them. And they have all kind of figured out how to access that actively with their paintbrush or their sewing machine or their jigsaw. Or their compressor, which is a definite talent.
I'll briefly show you the process because I have a work in progress. I start with drawing in a sketchbook, then I go to the wall and draw pretty much to scale, and then I put layers of tracing paper over it until I get the drawing exactly the way that I like it. So you can see, there's the shape that I arrived at after maybe 12 layers of drawing. And then, once I get that, I begin cutting. So I have two pieces right here. I happen to have two pieces with me. And this is the drawing I just showed you in progress. So it's one piece of wood, and as you can see, there's a little pilot hole. You might not see it from back there, there's a little hole. Wherever there's a negative space, I start with a hole, and then I cut inside there, and then I cut the whole outsides out after that. And then this piece was inspired by a piece of leftover wood that was 12 inches by 8 feet. So here's a sister piece that goes with it. And this one's sort of halfway painted. So again, one piece of wood. I mount them with little pops on the back so they pop off the wall. I usually put fluorescent paint on the back so it glows. And that's sort of the process. I brought my tools too, but not all of them.
So when you say you cut it, it's that's by hand. You don't put it. It's not like where you program a laser print. Or
No, this is
like
cut
that.
by hand. This one's just cut with a jigsaw. Just a plain jigsaw. And then, this is a fine blade, but bigger pieces or heavier pieces might take a fatter blade.
You're doing this on your dining room table?
No, I have a studio. It's small, but it's high functioning. But yeah, I have to be very neat and very methodical because wood is messy. In fact, the cutting can be so dusty and make so much mess that if it's a nice day, I just take it out in my yard and put the wood over two sawhorses and just cut. Tina, can you hear me cutting down the street when I'm cutting? My neighbor Tina's here. I often wonder if my neighbors hear me cutting and if they can't stand it. So the colors are actually layered, so by the time I get to the end, this is maybe halfway, not even. So by the time I get to the end, there's many, many, many layers to get to the point where it looks complete. Oil paint. It's just oil paint. Because it is so layered, I usually add liquid with some turpentine to speed up the drying process, especially for like yellows and reds, because there's so many layers. And I typically will work on 2 or 3 pieces at the same time, do all the cutting and then do all the painting. Well, I've been making art since the 80s. And so I started out doing sort of painting, more figurative and then abstract. And I always thought I wanted to get to sculpture, but I wanted to make sure I had sort of a language first. And my late husband and I bought a house that needed a lot of work. And after doing a lot of work, there was a lot of wood left over.
Oh, okay.
And so I started making canvases that were stretched over shapes.
Oh.
And then eventually the canvas part, I didn't really like the push of the canvas. I liked the wood better. So I started building wall-hung wood sculpture.
Oh, okay.
And then eventually got to this, which is more my more recent work, which sort of a cross between sculpture and painting.
Mm-hmm.
So because my studio is smaller, I'm working what I call flat, because it's easier to build flat than it is to build sculpture in a small studio.
Good, thank you.
Sometimes I will use wood
wood itself as my substrate to paint on, and then after I paint, and this will get sanded down, and then I'll keep painting, and then eventually I'll just work up wood on it. Or I'll start with the canvas, this is in process, and now I'm at the point where I can add wood to it, and it's like a puzzle. Yeah, thank you. My personal easel. I like this. So then my studio is just full of, I do 3,000 things at once. So then I'll eventually figure out what might work with it. And then I will attach it together, maybe put spaces in between it, and then I will go back again with paint to start to resolve the, try to make it so crazy, not to make it so crazy so that your eye can rest as it's looking around. And then I might get really bored with it because it's like, oh, now it's still flat. So then you got it? You're gonna come home with me. And then I'll take other parts and like put it on top of, just to give it more dimension.
Are those intentional selections that you planned, those small pieces to go?
No, my
with the
life is not
have an
intentional.
assortment in your toy box.
I have a toy box.
Yep.
Yeah, nothing's intentional. Well, I have a toy box, I'll pull stuff, and then from that, I'll make an intention, but I don't start painting this and say, okay, now I'm gonna do this kind of a piece
Right.
here to go there.
So on a Saturday night, you might be sitting in front of the TV, doing a small, throw it in a toy box.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, and a lot of the pieces that are in with collage, some of them are just, not in this particular piece, well, actually, right here, there's a little sketch for another painting I did years ago, and that's put into it. I go to the beach and I paint figures in watercolor, and then sometimes I'll just rip stuff out of my notebook and put it onto a piece, and you may never, the end process, nobody may ever see it, but it's in there somewhere.
What is your medium?
Everything. I use gouache, watercolor, acrylic, any mark making tool I can find, cold wax and oil, sometimes encaustic. It makes itself. I have one more. You don't have
While she's grabbing that, I will say that in our preparatory meeting, she just sort of randomly pulled strange things out of her pocket that she kind of selected throughout the day.
This is from this is my grandmother. And then as it and so she was my intent to do something with her. But as it started building, I realized I had a lot of old family photographs. So then I started making, okay, I'm gonna show my age. Instead of a Xeroxes of the photos and sticking that on there, this is from an old family letter to Italy. And so this is all in Italian, it's on there. And so she brought out memories in me, and then I placed them on the canvas as I'm going. Probably can't see it from way back there because a lot of my pieces you can see from a distance, but when you get up close, there's a very quiet conversation going on. As quiet as I can get, I'm not very quiet. So she was the only intent, the rest of it happened.
And that one's a finished piece.
Not yet.
2 years from now.
Oh no, it's not yet.
Do you ever finish?
No, actually I go back into pieces. And I also cannibalize pieces. It's like, oh, and then I'll rip it apart and put some in together. For this, this one, I took it all, it was one of those really beautiful ones from the 20s that are sort of sepia tone. And so I started with that, and I've got a lot of her in this position and that face. Since when I look at her, I see like my whole entire family. So here they are. When I start getting fussy, it's like, oh, this needs just a little bit of this, oh, and a little bit of that. It's like, oh, you know, it's like, it's too fussy. So then I'm finished for the moment, and it's never truly done until that goes to somebody else's house. I actually have a compressor and a nail gun. And so I shoot it a lot. And I too use E6000, and then Star Bond makes a really wonderful, it's like super glue, but it's like heavy duty woodworkers use it, and I'll use that oftentimes to hold things in place. But I'm a big fan of nail guns and staple guns in my compressor.
I began as a sewing, a seamstress. I was good enough, I used to make my husband suits, he could go to work and in them, and they'd still be fine. I did wedding gowns and all that kind of stuff, and then just kept playing with fiber. I've been doing fiber, anything fiber, since I was about 4. My grandmother gave me a spool knitting thing, and I did that. When I moved, we moved around quite a bit. Moved to Chicago, one of my friends said, come on, let's go take a quilting class. And I said, okay, I'll go do that, you know. Hated the 1/4 of an inch, because I'm used to just throwing stuff on people and cutting it, hacking it apart, you know, sort of thing. So like this having to be so precise was not my bag. But I really enjoyed the quilting process of it. And I became quite good at it.
I assume you have a long arm?
I have a long arm, yeah. And this quilting part, because I have a long arm, and those who don't know, I don't have this. I've got a big sewing machine. The table's 14 feet. The machine itself is 3 feet, and it rides on this table, and I've got like handles to click on and off, and I can draw, and I can paint and do anything I want. This is where I started going off the edge. When you can see I'm started 3-dimensional. I thought, well, you can make fibers do pretty much anything you want. Okay, so that's why I started with the 3-dimensional edges and that on my work. And then I started going, okay, if I can do that, how can I make it stick? And so I thought, okay, you could do it with glues, with starch, yada, yada. That wasn't folding it up enough. So when you see my leaves on the back wall there, I started going off into different ideas of art, different things, from fashion to cosplay, where the kids dress up like Batman and that sort of stuff. That's what I'm using for all my pieces now. And I found out, guess what? My sewing machine doesn't care if it's quilting fabric. It'll slam through anything. I can make that machine go through copper. I can run metal threads
What's your
through it.
machine?
I have a Gamel. Yeah, that thing is sweet. But when I go through it, so like the pieces on the back, what I did was I dye my fabrics, then I layer on this foam. It's called EVA foam. I put the EVA foam on there, drop some batting, because I like it to, I still go back to the batting, because you can see the poofiness here. So I get poofiness from the wool batting, and then I start throwing fabrics on top, and you're gonna ask me, do I have a plan? No, I do not have a plan. I have a plan that it's a leaf, and that's about it. And I draw as I go. Once I get it off the machine, then what I do is I heat it up with the heat gun, and I can form the whole piece, the EVA, and it'll go really loose, and when I cool it off, it'll maintain that shape, and it stays in that shape. But I can sew through it, and I sew the other edges. Then what I do is I take that, then I thought, okay, so she's talking about how did I get there? The leaves didn't look bad enough. They looked too pretty. So I took them out in the garage, and I took my blowtorch, and I kind of set fire to them. And actually the best ones are when you can get a whole pile and then you just drop it and they'll just catch fire. I know, and then you No, I'm not gonna show you. I'll show you if you want to see how I burn stuff. I'll take it out in the parking lot.
Yes, thank you very much.
But yeah, I have and I found, well, okay, you can burn the fabric, but it's learning how to control the burn. And yeah, I can control it. I'm pretty good at controlling it. Yeah.
All those crystals are glued on that one?
Yep.
And what adhesive holds through a washing?
E6000, best glue on earth. Yeah, best glue. I'm always trying new things. And I'm like, I've got a mind like a sieve, like squirrel, I'm gonna go do that, sort of thing. So I usually have about 20 things at least going on at all times. Yeah. All freehand. I don't have a computer on my machine, yeah. Everything is freehand. When you see the pieces at the front, that's all freehand. Even the what do you call it? The ferns and stuff, that's all thread that I just thread paint and I just draw, and when I finish and wash it away, the glue stays sort of, and then I can form it, but that's all thread and it's all freehand. There's no, I don't use the embroidery, yeah. Or laces.
Do you use foam, just foam, or do you use batting too?
I've tried batting and it goes floppy, so like when you see the vases I have at the front, those are all out of the EVA, because it's the one thing I found that I can mold and it'll maintain the shape and won't fall down. The leaves won't fall off the wall. I've tried metal. After a while, unless you anneal the metal, it'll all of a sudden just start, sort of thing, and so you're always shoving it back up again. I'm working with a new one, it's called Foss-Shape, and Foss-Shape is sort of like it looks like a batting and a mix between a batting and a felt. And when you, and the same, and we used to make those hats that you see at the show, the fancy ones, or costumes and that kind of stuff, and it's like a loose fiber. Once you heat it again with the hot air gun or steam, I've got a steamer, it will maintain the shape. So right now I've got some vases that are sitting on there that are gonna be, and what I'm gonna do with them, I can sew through them, but also, because I'm an encaustic artist as well, I can still sew through it, but I can also put the wax on top of it, so I'll have a 3D sculpture with the wax, and yet it's very light. It's not heavy and doesn't break when it falls over. I used to, when I first started doing this, I limited myself. I thought, I've got, my husband's listening, I've got a bit of fabric.
Stash.
It's not, well, there's stashes and then there's stashes.
It's a toy bar.
And so I felt kind of like I have to use that fabric up, but I've come to the conclusion at 74, it'll never happen. So I just don't have enough time. So I've also started going because when I'm doing my leaves and any of my other fiber pieces, people like to look at the back of it. So you want to I don't want the white showing. So everything's either hand dyed, hand painted. And then on top of it, I've started doing, like if you watch the waterfall at the front there, that is a curtain from Walmart that I boiled on the stove. And then you set fire to it. But that's what so any kind of fabric.
Do you have to pay extra insurance because of all this flammability?
I have no idea what you're talking about. And most of and I do my blowtorching and the big things like that. I'll do that in the garage. Like I said, my
Next to the
husband.
gas can.
Yeah, but the encaustic I do upstairs, and I have about 3 studios. The whole house is a studio, is what it is. So I've got one bedroom that I do my encaustic on, and I melt my wax and set fire to stuff. So. Most of the yarn I've got, because I'm a knitter as well, so I've got all kinds of yarn. But the yarns that I have on there, I have a supplier that I found on Etsy, and she grows the sheep. And they're the kind with the little locks, sort of thing. Yeah, so I get her to hand dye